There is a very specific type of humiliation that only happens in a room full of people who are pretending not to notice you're being humiliated. It's the sound of silver scraping against porcelain, the low hum of polite laughter, and the burning weight of two empty chairs that feel louder than the entire party combined. I sat there, draped in expensive lace and a diamond that caught the light, feeling like a fraudulent center of attention, because the only people I actually wanted to impress hadn't even bothered to check their watches. Have you ever stood in the middle of your own celebration and felt like a guest who was accidentally invited? The restaurant's private room was beautiful, all mahogany and soft amber lighting. It was designed to feel intimate, but to me, it felt like an interrogation room. My fiancé, Mark, comes from a family that shows up. They don't just attend, they occupy space with their warmth. His cousins were filling the air with stories, their laughter clinking against the wine glasses like music. But my eyes kept drifting to the far end of the long table. Two chairs, two perfectly set places with white linen napkins folded into crisp triangles. Someone, probably a well-meaning server, or perhaps Mark's mother, in an act of hopeful politeness, had placed small, elegant name cards there. Mom, Dad. They sat there like tiny tombstones marking the place where my parents were supposed to be. I found myself checking my phone under the table every 30 seconds, a nervous tick I couldn't suppress. I wasn't checking for a "we're running late" text anymore. I was checking to see if I still existed in their world at all. Why is it that the people who gave us life are often the ones who make us feel the most invisible? Mark noticed. He's always noticed the things I try to hide in the shadows of my own expression. Under the table, his hand found mine. He didn't squeeze it with pity. That would have broken me right there in front of everyone. Instead, he just held it steady, a silent anchor in a room where I felt like I was drifting out to sea. His eyes met mine, a quiet question hovering in them, but I just offered a tight, brittle smile. I wasn't ready to admit the truth yet. Halfway through the second course, the weight of those empty chairs became suffocating. I excused myself, murmuring something about the powder room, and slipped out into the long, carpeted hallway. The silence of the corridor felt like a physical relief after the performative joy of the dining room. I dialed my mother's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring felt like a rhythmic punch to the gut. I almost hung up, almost let the silence win, but then the line clicked open. "Oh, honey, I was just thinking about you," my mother's voice chirped. She sounded bright, energized, and completely distracted. In the background, I didn't hear the hushed tones of a car or the rustle of someone rushing to an event. I heard the unmistakable clattering chaos of a busy bistro, glasses clinking, a waiter shouting an order, and a burst of laughter that I recognized instantly. It was my sister, Sarah. "Where are you?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, even to my own ears. "We're at La Piazza," she said, her tone as casual as if she were telling me the weather. "You wouldn't believe it. Your sister just got the news. She's been promoted to regional manager. Can you imagine? At her age? Your father was so proud he insisted we take her out for a celebratory dinner immediately. We're having the most divine champagne." I leaned my forehead against the cool wallpaper of the hallway. The patterns on the wall seemed to blur into a dizzying mess. "The party, Mom. My engagement party. It started 2 hours ago. You knew tonight was the night." There was a pause. It wasn't the pause of someone who had forgotten. It was the pause of someone who had remembered and decided it didn't weigh as much as what they were currently doing. "Well, we thought you'd understand, sweetheart," she said, and I could hear the shrug in her voice. "This is a massive milestone for Sarah, a career-defining moment. We figured your dinner was just, a social thing. You're with Mark's family anyway, right? They're so lovely. I'm sure they're taking great care of you." In the background, I heard Sarah say something, followed by my father's deep, boisterous laugh. They were celebrating a promotion. I was celebrating the beginning of the rest of my life. In the hierarchy of our family, her paycheck will always be more sacred than my heart. Is it strange that I wasn't even angry? Anger requires energy. It requires the belief that things should be different. But as I stood there in that hallway, listening to the muffled sounds of a party I wasn't invited to, I felt a profound, heavy tiredness. It was the exhaustion of a marathon runner who realizes they've been running in the wrong direction for 20 years. Okay, I said. Just that. One word. You're not upset, are you? My mother asked, a hint of irritation creeping in now. She hated it when I made things difficult by having feelings. I looked at my reflection in a decorative mirror on the wall. My makeup was perfect. My dress was stunning. I looked like a woman who had everything except for the one thing she was born needing. Of course not, I said, and a strange, calm smile spread across my face. Just don't be surprised when you miss the wedding, too. She laughed, that airy, dismissive sound she used to sweep uncomfortable truths under the rug. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Chloe. We'll see you soon. I'm not being dramatic, I whispered, but I had already pressed the end call button. I walked back into that private dining room with a clarity I had never possessed before. I didn't look at the empty chairs this time. I looked at Mark. I looked at his mother, who was currently telling a story about Mark's childhood with so much pride her eyes were misty. I looked at his father, who had spent the last hour making sure my glass was never empty and that I felt included in every joke. The party finished. I played my part. When people asked where my parents were, I gave them the polished, bloodless truth. Something urgent came up with my sister. People nodded, their eyes flickering with a sympathy they tried to hide. They knew. Everyone knows the daughter who is the afterthought. The drive home was quiet. Mark didn't push. He's a man who understands that some wounds need to be cleaned before they can be bandaged. He just drove, one hand on the wheel and the other resting on my knee. The silence between us wasn't a void. It was a bridge. I'm done, Mark, I said, as we pulled into our driveway. I know, he replied. He didn't ask what I was done with. He didn't need to. That night, while the world slept, I sat at my desk and began to dismantle the life I had built around the hope of their approval. It was like pruning a dead tree. It felt violent, but necessary. The guest list was the first to go. I opened the spreadsheet and highlighted 2 rows. Delete. It's funny how easy it is to erase someone from a document. If only it were that easy to erase the muscle memory of wanting them to love you. The next morning, the wedding plans transformed. We moved the venue from a large, cavernous hall to a small, hidden garden. We cut the guest list by half. And then, I did the thing that I knew would change the trajectory of my family forever. I wrote a letter. But I didn't send it to my parents. I sent it to Mark's parents. They had been so incredibly kind to me. They had offered to pay for the rehearsal dinner. They had checked in on me during the holidays when my own mother forgot to call, and they had treated me like a daughter from the moment we met. I felt I owed them the truth, not as a weapon, but as an explanation for why the bride's side of the aisle was going to be so hauntingly quiet. I poured 28 years of silence into those pages. I didn't write about big explosive fights. There were none. I wrote about the quiet erasure. I wrote about my 10th birthday, where the party was cancelled because Sarah had a dance recital in the next town over, and I spent the evening in the back of a minivan eating a lukewarm burger while she clutched a trophy. I wrote about my high school graduation, where I was the valedictorian. I remember standing on that stage, looking for their faces, only to find out later they had left early to take Sarah to a college orientation that wasn't even mandatory. I wrote about the family dinners where I would start a sentence, only for my father to interrupt me to talk about Sarah's latest achievement, and how eventually I just stopped finishing my sentences altogether. I wrote about the phone call from the hallway of the restaurant. At the very end of the letter, I wrote the sentence that felt like the final brick in the wall. I'm not trying to punish them. I'm just done rearranging my life to compete for their attention. Mark's parents responded within 24 hours. They didn't call to gossip or to judge. They simply sent a short note. We love you. The wedding will be a place of peace. Whatever you need, we are your family now. For a week, there was a strange, vibrating stillness. No one called, no one texted. I began to think that maybe I had slipped out of their lives as quietly as I had always existed within them. But then, on a Tuesday afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I knew the rhythm of that knock, heavy, impatient. When I opened the door, my father was standing there. He looked smaller than I remembered. In his hand, he held a piece of paper that had been folded and refolded so many times the edges were starting to fray. My letter. My heart did a strange, frantic dance in my chest, but my voice remained steady. How did you get that? He didn't look angry. That was the most unsettling part. Usually, when he was challenged, he became a wall of noise and authority. Today, he looked like a man who had walked into a room and realized he was in the wrong house. I went to see Mark's parents, he said, his voice raspy. I wanted to talk to his father about the wedding budget. I thought they were being difficult about the guest list. He held up the paper. Your sister was with me. She saw this on their kitchen counter. She thought it was an invitation she hadn't seen yet. She read it. Then she gave it to me. I stepped back, opening the door wider. I didn't invite him in with warmth. I invited him in like a witness to a crime scene. Come in, Dad. He walked into my living room but didn't sit down. He paced the small space, still clutching the letter. I don't understand most of this, Chloe. Why would you say these things to strangers? To your new in-laws? You've made us look like monsters. Are you upset about what happened? Or are you upset that people know it happened? I asked. He stopped pacing. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in a decade. I don't remember it like this, he muttered. The birthday? The graduation? We were always there for you. We provided for you. Providing isn't the same as witnessing, Dad, I said quietly. You were in the room, but you weren't looking at me. You were always looking past me to see what Sarah was doing. I pointed to the paper in his hand. Read it. Out loud. He frowned. I've already read it. No, I insisted. Read it out loud. Right now. I want to hear how my life sounds when it comes out of your mouth. The silence in the apartment was heavy, like the air before a storm. Have you ever forced someone to look at the wreckage they caused? It's not a moment of triumph, it's a moment of profound grief. He hesitated, then slowly unfolded the paper. His voice was shaky at first. He started with the description of the empty chairs at the engagement party. As he read my words, the description of the restaurant noise, the name cards, the way I felt like a fraudulent center of attention, his voice began to crack. When he got to the part about the high school graduation, he stopped. He looked up at me, his eyes searching. I thought you said it was okay that we left. You said you had your friends there. I was 17, I said. What was I supposed to say? Please stay and love me more than you love her? He went back to the letter. He read about the phone call from the hallway. He read about my mother's laughter. He read about how I realized I was just tired. By the time he reached the final paragraph, his hands were trembling. He read the last line. I'm just done rearranging my life to compete for their attention. The paper dropped to his side. He didn't defend himself. He didn't tell me I was being dramatic or sensitive. He just stood there in the middle of my living room, looking at the floor. So, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The wedding. It's already changed? We aren't. The wedding is for the people who show up, Dad, I said. And for the first time in my life, I'm only inviting people who see me. He nodded slowly. He didn't look like the powerful man who had dominated every family dinner of my youth. He looked like someone who had just realized he'd been holding a winning ticket for 30 years and had accidentally let it blow out the window. He looked around my apartment, at the photos of Mark and me, at the books on my shelves, at the life I had built entirely without his input. He looked like a tourist in a foreign country. I didn't realize, he said. He looked at the letter again. I believed her. I believed your mother when she said you were fine. I believed your sister when she said you didn't mind. Loneliness makes dangerous choices feel reasonable, I said, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. And I chose to stop needing you. It was the most dangerous thing I've ever done. He didn't try to hug me. He didn't offer a grand apology. I think we both knew that an apology at this stage would be like putting a band-aid on a severed limb. It was too late for "I'm sorry." We were in the territory of "it is what it is." "I should go," he said. He slipped the letter into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. It was the closest my words would ever get to him. "Dad," I called out as he reached the door. He paused, his hand on the frame. "The chairs at the wedding won't be empty," I said. "I've taken them away. There's no space left for people who aren't there." He didn't turn around. He just bowed his head slightly and stepped out into the hallway. The click of the door closing was the quietest sound in the world, yet it felt like a mountain collapsing. I sat down on my sofa and breathed. For the first time in my life, the air didn't feel like it belonged to someone else. The apartment was silent, but it wasn't the lonely silence of my childhood. It was the peaceful silence of a house that had finally been cleared of ghosts. Desire whispers louder than guilt, and for years, my desire for their love had drowned out the guilt they should have felt. But now the scales were finally balanced. I don't know if they'll change. I don't know if my father will ever speak to my mother about that letter, or if they'll just bury it under another big moment for Sarah. But as I sat there watching the sun set through my window, I realized it didn't matter. I had stopped waiting for them to show up. And in doing so, I had finally shown up for myself. If you've ever felt like the extra in your own family's movie, I want you to know that you're allowed to walk off the set. You're allowed to find a new cast. You're allowed to be the lead. The wedding was 3 months later. It was small. It was outside. The sun was warm on my shoulders, and when I looked out at the guests, there wasn't a single empty chair. Every person there was looking at me. Every person there wanted to be there. I walked myself down the aisle. Some might find that sad. But as I took those steps toward Mark, I realized I wasn't walking alone. I was walking with the woman I had become, the one who no longer needed to ask for permission to exist. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to make the hard choice to protect your peace over your past, please let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about reclaiming your power and setting boundaries that stick, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. Would you like me to tell you what happened when my mother finally realized why her invitation never arrived?